And the next topic is also quite related. So a lot of this conversation is probably going to carry over. Man of Steel 2, which recently had locked the legendary DC producer Charles Roven, and it got Stephen Knight to write the film, who was, of course, from Peaky Blinders, is also been officially declined from Warner Brothers. Now, this was a story that came out a few weeks ago or a few days ago, and Charles Roven is a guy that's, was attached to the Dark Knight trilogy, Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, the Ultimate Edition, I believe Wonder Woman, and of course Justice League, and of course many other films as well. As soon as I heard he was attached to Man of Steel 2, I thought, okay, there's no way this thing is not happening now. With that level of high caliber films under his belt, I thought there's no way that this movie is not happening. And it sounds like from the reports that James Gunn and Peter Safran are still open to a Man of Steel 2, but a different pitch. So, Eleanor, what do you think about that?
Again, big sad, big disappointment, because the Dark Knight and Dark Knight trilogy itself, all three movies, are some of the most successful comic book movies of all time, and they're some of the greatest, in my opinion.
And you could say, of course, Nolan is most to credit for that.
Right. But even if they had like a similar feel, I would be like, why wouldn't you say yes to that? But I guess if they have a feeling in mind that they want their movies to have, and it doesn't line up, I get that. But if you're calling it Man of Steel 2, I think you also have to have some continuity with the first Man of Steel. You can't entirely change the flavor of it, if that makes sense. It has to feel like Man of Steel. Otherwise, it can't be Man of Steel 2. Otherwise, it's just a reboot, to me, at least, because if you make it feel entirely different, that's just like saying, oh, this is the exact same as Christopher Reeves, but it's also Man of Steel 2. For me, that doesn't work. Like, Brandon Routh's worked as a sequel because it felt the same. He damn near looks like Christopher Reeve, and because his Superman acted very, very similarly, if not the exact same, as Christopher Reeve. So it worked as kind of a Superman 5. Like, Man of Steel was entirely different. It was a reboot of that.
Right.
And I don't think if you're going to change the tone, you would have to call it a reboot again. Just in my opinion.
Even with Henry Cavill?
Even with Henry Cavill. Because if you're going to entirely change the tone, it's not the same Superman to me. Unless you're going to explain it somehow through, after Justice League, X, Y, and Z happened, and now this. That might work. You may be able to do some writing jazz and exposition and fill that in for me. But it still might not be believable to me. Because, Henry Cavill's Superman at times was jaded, was kind of dark, was depressed. He wasn't always happy, sunshine, go lucky. He had harder moments. And not saying that the other Supermen haven't, but it's just the type of jaded and the type of sadness that he experienced was very, I was going to say iconic, but unique is more the word I'm looking for. More unique to Zack Snyder's vision. So I think that's why they probably turned it down too, was just because we want to get away from that and move into this. And to me, it's a little disappointing. Last week I had high hopes. I'm like, I'm so excited for DC. I'm going to stay positive. And now this week I'm like the exact opposite. I'm like, what are they doing to my favorite characters?
So are you saying that they're going to do a Man of Steel 2 with a new tone, but also with Henry Cavill or without him?
If they do a Man of Steel 2, I think that's what they do. But I don't have any insider information, by the way. I'm just speculating here. I honestly don't think it's going to happen now.
Right. And also, it should be noted that it was never officially titled Man of Steel 2, but it was a kind of understood that it was a sequel to Man of Steel.
Right.
So it was, even though it was going to have more of a Richard Donner tone, like you said, with Henry Cavill. I'm on the other side of the fence with you, though. I think that they could have done a more lighthearted Superman film with Henry Cavill, called it Superman, the Man of Tomorrow, or whatever, or Man of Steel 2 even, because we've seen Henry Cavill already in a more lighter tone. There was a lot of moments in Man of Steel, less moments in Batman vs. Superman, but still a lot of moments with him and his mother, and him with Lois, especially in the Ultimate Edition. The Ultimate Edition had so many more scenes with Clark being a
Right.
journalist, Clark being almost like a detective at times too, and also being a husband and a son, which also paid a lot more off. It had a lot more emotional payoff for me when he later died in the film. But anyways, I do think that they could have done it with him and with a new tone, because once we got to even Zack Snyder's Justice League, he's almost making jokes when he's beating up Steppenwolf. Like, so I do think that he could have been portrayed in a brighter light, and it doesn't have to be in a darker setting, because I think that the world around him was just more dark. If Christopher Reeve's Superman was in Batman versus Superman, and the world was still reacting to Superman the way it did to Henry Cavill's, which was very conflicted, which almost mirrored the way that the audience felt about Man of Steel, which was very conflicted. The world debated in Batman vs. Superman whether or not the world even needed a Superman. And if Christopher Reeve had that reaction to him, or his Superman had that reaction from the world of, they were debating on, is he a god? Is he a man with the powers of a god who's just trying to do the right thing? Should he be, held accountable for his actions? Should he be sent in when we want him to? I think Christopher Reeve's Superman would have reacted quite similarly to Henry Cavill's, which is why I love Henry Cavill's Superman so much, is because I do think he is so similar to Christopher Reeve's Superman. He was just in a lot more darker settings, which is more, I think more realistic, at least to today's setting. Both are great, and I think both are just the Superman of their era. But it sounds like Man of Steel 2 is no longer a thing. And it wasn't a thing for the last 10 years. And then the
Right.
last 3 months, there was hey, any of you Superman fans, here's some hope. And then James Gunn, Peter Safran came in, and now none of us know anything at all. And we're all
Yeah.
just going crazy in circles speculating.
That meme of the guy with the papers and the nails and the red string, and he just looks insane.
Right,
He's like,
yes.
that's all of us right now. We're all like, no, I know what's going on because of this.
You see, James Gunn tweeted that he doesn't like Henry Cavill, and then somebody else
don't
said...
even get into that, dude. Don't even get into that.
Well, what do you guys think about Man of Steel 2, which had Charles Robin, Stephen Knight attached, no longer happening, or at least was declined, rejected by Warner Bros. Discovery? Are you on board with it being declined because you have so much faith in James Gunn and Peter Safran, or maybe other reasons, or are you disappointed like me and Eleanor? Whatever you think, we'd love to hear your insight onto this.